Hello everyone, it's Luli and today I'll be doing another video on my Otome diaries, this time talking about Xi'an from Ou遠のヴィルシュ. So this is the third character route that I played, and yeah, basically I'll be going through his route and then talking about my thoughts and opinions regarding him and his story. But yeah, before I start, I'd like to note that this is a spoiler review, so I will be literally talking about everything that I say everything. The major things that happen in his route. So if you don't want to know anything, then I would definitely move on, because yeah, I'll literally be talking about like the major plot stuff that happens, as well as like the two endings that I've completed, that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a very spoiler review type thing. But anyway, let me start. I'm not gonna lie, like looks wise, he was my kind of, not quite favourite maybe, because Anku took the spot of favourite looks wise. But he definitely was second or third, like with Adolf. And but the thing is, and if you adored his route, then you may want to skip this, because this video is gonna be like my brutal honest thoughts on him. So you know, if you're like, oh my god, I love Xi'an and his route, then I might move on, because in this video I will be brutally honest. And yeah, basically I played Mattis and Lucas and I was like, oh, these routes are great, they're awesome. And then I come to Xi'an's route and it's kind of like a bit bland. Like I wasn't necessarily bored, but I was disappointed, considering he, you know, looks wise he was my favourite, and also, I don't know, there was just so much they could have done with this route that they didn't, and I will explain to you what I mean in a moment. So let me just quickly go through what happens in his route. I say quickly, it's gonna be a while, but anyway, so basically it starts with her, you know, finding out that you know, Blow's dead, because that happens in front of her eyes, and then she basically ends up having to look after, in a way, Xi'an, because what happens is Dahato, which is Xi'an's next, sort of like his, not quite helper, but a fellow scientist that's just below Xi'an. He usually cleans up Xi'an's room and looks after him, but he got fed up, which, I mean, I don't blame him, because Xi'an's route, I mean, honestly, it's such a mess. Like, there's books everywhere, there's just stuff everywhere, and yeah, Dahato cleans it up, and then a few hours later it's back to being messy again. Anyway, Dahato's like, I can't deal with you right now, so I'm going on holiday. So Xi'an's left with no choice but to either clean up himself or to find a substitute, and obviously he's gonna pick the substitute, and that's when Celeste comes into play, because I think Xi'an, in the common route, when they're all like living together, kind of witnesses that Celeste is quite good with the whole cleaning thing, and she even enjoys cleaning. So, you know, he goes, okay, I'll hire her. And so she gets hired, and it's kind of like watching her and Xi'an get like interact with each other and all of this. Now, the thing is, right, in all the other routes, there were like major plot occurrences where like this happens and that happens. But in Xi'an's route, like a lot of it is kind of, you watch Xi'an making a mess and then Celeste cleaning it up, but not overly cleaning it up, so Xi'an's happy, and it's just that rinse and repeat in a way. For some reason, I didn't find it necessarily boring, because it was fun watching them interact. But you've got to understand that Xi'an is a scientist who does not care about emotions and thinks it's a waste to feel emotions, and his emotions getting in the way of his research. He sees that as a waste. So when he creates a clone of himself, he makes it so that emotions are relatively suppressed, and that he only feels a tiny bit, to the extent that he can kind of, you know, be on the same page as other people. So when other people describe their feelings, he can kind of go, okay, yeah, fair enough. But he suppresses his feelings, like emotions, on his clone, so much so that he won't really like love anyone or feel that emotional, so that he can just focus on work. So throughout the whole route, you know, like, you can tell that it's not gonna be that romancy, or at least I wouldn't expect it to, and if it did, it would kind of be like, what are you doing? And even when he kind of appreciates Celeste, it's not as a human being or as a girl, he appreciates her as a useful tool, shall we say. I mean, fortunately, I appreciated that Celeste understands that and doesn't like hope for romance or anything. She fully understands that Xi'an is using her and sees her as a tool, and I kind of like the fact that she's so accepting of that and isn't like being overly annoyingly hopeful like you see in a lot of Otome games. And you can really see this because one day Xi'an lets her go into the research room, because basically Dahato says to Xi'an, you know, if you want to be a good employer, you need to give your employees a little bit of a treat every now and then. And I guess to Xi'an, letting her see the research is kind of like a treat, I guess. So one day she goes to oh, and bearing in mind, that's not because he likes her or anything, it's because he doesn't want to lose his, you know, favourite tool. So, I know, it's a bit robotic. Anyway, she's in this research room when one of Dahato's underlings, shall we say, decides to take Celeste as hostage to try and get Xi'an to kind of almost agree or kill himself in a way, and reason being that Dahato and Xi'an's research are quite different, like they're separate, because Dahato's focusing very much on how the clones feel, so emotions. So he's kind of working on creating a clone where they can actually feel the love, because one of the side effects of the reliver technology is that, you know, when you get turned into a clone, if you fall in love, or if you're in love with someone, or if you care deeply for someone, that emotion isn't there anymore. You remember that you felt love, you remember that you really cared about this person, but you don't feel it, if that makes sense. So Dahato's work is very much focused on trying to create clones that are able to feel that. Whereas Xi'an, on the other hand, is very much focused on creating clones that, you know, are like long lasting. So he's doing his best to create clones that last longer than 23 years. And because Dahato's research isn't really going to plan, Xi'an basically says to Dahato, and I guess Dahato tells this to his employees, that, you know, Xi'an's going to cut the research funds or stop them from doing any further research on it, as for years they've been working on this and there has been no progress. And I guess Dahato's employee finds this out and basically wants Xi'an to agree to let them continue this research. And I think basically he tries to get Xi'an to kind of, I can't remember if it was die or to allow them to continue research. I think he wanted Dahato to become, you know, head of like the person in charge, because it literally goes Xi'an and then Dahato. So if Xi'an goes away, then Dahato immediately becomes the head of the research facility, and therefore, you know, they can all do whatever they want, because Dahato would be like, yeah, sure, that's what I want to do too. And now in this scene, I guess a normal person would be like, no, don't kill Celeste, she's my beloved, or whatever. Like in Otome games, that's what happens. But it's Xi'an, you know, he doesn't care. He has no emotion. Like, that's just clear right from the beginning. So he's like, yeah, go ahead, kill her, I don't care. And it's obvious he's not just saying that, he actually means it. Like, he's like, yeah, go for it. I don't care about Celeste emotionally, she's just useful for me. It's a bit annoying that I have to find someone else, but oh well, type of thing, right? And I think what I appreciated about this scene is they kind of stuck to it, and even Celeste is like, oh yeah, no, he means it, because the person who's taken her hostage is like, oh, did you hear that? Don't you feel anything? Aren't you sad or whatever? And Celeste is like, well, not really, because I knew that, and he did say to me, if this happens, then he's not going to rescue me, you know, like, it is what it is. And she says it so directly, and I really appreciated that, because I'm like, okay, so they're not doing any of this trying to make it all wonderful stuff. They're actually, you know, stuck to the idea that Xi'an is, you know, completely robotic and doesn't have any emotions. So, but anyway, now all of that happens, and then I think, however, Celeste does gradually feel, maybe not like in love with Xi'an, but like I think she gradually feels almost close to him. And Xi'an, I think, doesn't like this because he thinks it will be annoying. And I think some people may basically read into this and think that, you know, maybe Xi'an's starting to like her but doesn't want to. That's why he's pushing her away. Now, this is not how I see it, because right from the start, as I keep on saying, it's very clear that Xi'an does not feel love or the emotions that most people would, because his clones are made to suppress that. So, you know, as a result of Celeste gradually kind of feeling fonder of Xi'an notices this, and I guess he's like, oh, I can't deal with that because I don't want a tool that likes me. I just want a tool that will just do what I want it to. So he basically reveals, and I say reveal, but it's, in my opinion, bloody obvious. So this is the issue I had with this. Basically, Xi'an reveals that he actually does experiments, like inhumane experiments, on live humans as well. So what they do is they get criminals that are going to get executed anyway, and they bring them to Xi'an's research facility on which Xi'an does experiments on. Now, the issue I have is this is a great plot, like, you know, they could have done so much with this. They could have, you know, gone into detail what he does, or make it like a horror thing like they did in Mattis's Route and Lucas's Route. Like they could have done so much with this. But what happens is they go, oh, here you go, and then they go, yeah, Xi'an does inhumane experiments, and then that's it. They don't go into detail on what he does, or what, like, they don't go into it at all. It literally is a fact that's thrown at you, and you probably expect it by that point, that Xi'an does experiments on like live humans, and then they go, yeah, and then that's the end of the scene, and you're like, are you kidding me? Like, you could have done so much with that, and you're just leaving it there. And then, you know, it kind of continues, and you kind of also see the sort of disagreement between Xi'an and the royalty, because the royalty are always kind of trying to be nice to Xi'an when Xi'an knows that the royalty don't like him because he has more power than them in a way, because he's in charge of the reliver technology. And yeah, so there's all of this, and I don't know, it's just, there wasn't really much to it. I'm so sorry if you like this route. It's just, I found it kind of bland compared to, it could be that the other two routes were so impactful that this one seemed bland, and if this route was in another game, then who knows, I may have absolutely adored it. But yeah, it just, and then, oh, what happens again? Oh yeah, and then you find out that Salome, aka Mum, so Celeste's, you know, stepmother type thing, or, you know, because Mum is the person that adopted Celeste, you find out that she knew about Xi'an's, you know, inhumane experiments, and that's why she was so protective. And actually Salome is also wanting to find basically the reasons as to why this curse that kills people at the age 23 exists. So she's kind of for it, and you also find out that she actually took in Celeste and Adolphe for the fact that Adolphe has a very strong body, like he doesn't show any signs of illness, and as for Celeste, obviously she has her like weird death god-like abilities. So you find out that initially Salome actually took them in so that then she could hand them over to Xi'an for Xi'an to do experiments on, and you're like, okay, whatever. But you know, obviously emotions come into play, and so Salome decides actually she loves these two as her own children, and so yeah, that's that. But now the climax or whatever is that basically things happen, and then everyone thinks that all these murders that are continuing to happen in the city is because Xi'an's been making relivers that aren't good, because all the deaths were of relivers, and it seemed to be very coincidental, and so everyone starts believing that the reason why all these people are dying is actually because Xi'an's, you know, making defective clones. And so there's this uproar, and then the royalty don't help because one of the royal members finds out that Xi'an's come up with technology, whether that he's made the reliver stronger, so this royal guy is like, oh no, I want to be the first one, and then he does the reliver technology onto himself, and then he ends up coming out as this clone that can't live, and then Xi'an's like, I don't care, that's your own problem, and all of this happens. So then the royalty hates Xi'an and then tells the population of this country, Al-Bashar, that, you know, Xi'an's the culprit and he's evil and all of this, and how, yeah, so then Xi'an and Celeste need to go into hiding. Now, the problem is, one day they get a call from the orphanage of which Celeste was, and then they find out that a bunch of royalty and their, you know, I guess guards have come in and are basically going on a killing rampage. And they turn out, and this is, I kid you not, this is the only bit that really left an impact on my mind. Okay, there's one other thing that I'll mention at the end, but this is one of the very little things that actually remained in my mind, and I'm laughing, it's really not funny, it was just a shock, in all honesty, a very big shock. They finally get to the orphanage, but then they find out Adolf is being dragged to the floor, and so that he can't move, and then one of the guards chops his head off, and you're like, oh, and Salome's like in tears, and all of this happens, and you're like, oh my gosh. So Xi'an and Celeste finally get there, but then the moment they get there, Adolf's head is cut off, which I guess kind of links with the Salome and her cutting someone's head off story. But anyway, it's all very shocking, and then they all go in hiding because, you know, all the guards and the royalty and people are all looking for them because they're the evil ones or whatever. And yeah, so all of that happens. Now, as I said, there are two bad endings, just like all the other routes, before you can even do the good ending, which I believe you either have to complete 4 routes or all routes before you can do the good ending. Anyway, so let me go through the 2 endings. And again, the endings, it's interesting, don't get me wrong, but what happens is basically, and I'll talk about the non-CG ending, which was very, to me, again, bland and a bit like, okay. So Salome goes a bit crazy. She hates the royalty by now because her son was killed by the royalty, and so she basically wants them all dead. But Xi'an's like, we shouldn't do that to start with. We should make a clone that, you know, is able to, I think by this point, he doesn't want to make a clone necessarily. He said he basically wants to make a clone for himself that can feel emotion so that he can understand how it feels to be in love with Celeste. But he also wants to make that clone so that he can finally begin working yet again on finding out the, you know, source of this curse that affects this country, like why people die at the age 23. Like, he wants to find the reason and then resolve it rather than make clones that allow them to continue living despite the curse. So he comes to this realization because initially that was his aim, but then halfway through, I guess he started getting obsessed with making clones. So yeah, he comes to realization, and so that's what he wants to do. Meanwhile, Salome is like, yes, that's great. However, I also want all royalty to be killed as well. I want them all executed, and I want them all gone. And Xi'an's like, I don't think that's a good idea. In the non-CG bad ending, basically what happens is Salome, out of nowhere, comes along, backstab and kills Celeste, saying that if there's this reason, it will drive Xi'an to kill the royalty as well, and it kind of ends there, and you're like, okay, compared to the other 2 routes, this is a very abrupt, meh, bad ending, or at least for me it was a meh, despair ending. And as I say, I'm sorry if you like this video. I'm probably not giving it justice because I found it bland, but like, perhaps you can put in the comments or something why you thought it was good, because then maybe I might change my mind. But I don't know, I found it a bit bland. Now the second despair ending, it was a bit more interesting, but I feel like it was a bit forced. So what happens is Salome doesn't backstab Celeste. I think she just kind of accepts it. Celeste and Xi'an successfully sneak into the research facility. They manage to get Xi'an into the capsule so that he can turn himself into a stronger clone or something. And then it all starts. Celeste is like, yes, I will defend you to the best of my ability, but obviously the reality is she's weak. So what happens is she gets killed in front of Xi'an's eyes. Xi'an can't do anything because he's in the capsule. He finally manages to go through the completion of becoming a stronger clone. And then he finds out that Celeste is still just about living. So he puts her in the capsule and, you know, starts the process of putting her memories onto the clone. Now what happens is her body dies before they can create the clone and put her memories onto it. So then he decides to put Celeste's memories and thought processes onto his brain, and the CG is of him like this, right? And it's interesting because, you know, there's this like however many months later, and you hear him talking to her, and at this point you don't know this, you just hear him talking to her and you think, oh, this is surprising, you know, it seems like a relatively happy ending, which is really weird because, you know, it's supposed to be a despair ending. And then you find out that she's not actually there, it's just her thought process and her in his mind. So it's almost like he's got a different personality in his mind who he speaks to. And by this point he can also feel emotions, he can also feel love. So he's got chest pains because he's sad and all this, but he doesn't really understand it. And the CG is of, yeah, him getting a bit crazy and stressed out while working on new reliver technology, as well as the source behind the curse. And I mean, it's interesting, but the reason why I say it feels forced is because it felt forced to be a despair ending. Either I think Celeste should have just died, or it should have been a good ending where Celeste survives. Like, it was almost like they went, we would normally make it a good ending, but this is supposed to be a despair ending, but if we just kill her off, that's boring. So let's merge the two together and make this half kind of semi-happy, semi-not weird despair ending. And don't get me wrong, it's different, but it was almost like they forced it, and that's why it's different, and that's why it didn't really leave that much of an impression, although it was interesting. And so, as you can tell, I wasn't really like that into his route. To me it just seemed like him and Celeste, you know, their slice of life, and then things happen, he gets chased by the royalty, he decides he needs to do research again, he comes back and things like he gets back into research. I don't know, that's how I saw it. Now I'm sure some of you would disagree with me because we all have different opinions when it comes to routes. Honestly, if you disagree with me, please do let me know in the comments below, because I'd like to change my mind. And then if you manage to change my mind, then maybe I can play the route again and then think differently. So I would appreciate it if you could let me know what you thought about the route. Oh, and I did say one more. There were two things that left an impact. One was Adolf's head being cut off. It was just such a sudden, shocking thing. And then another one is basically there is one really cute moment, because the thing is Xi'an is kind of adorable in that... So one of the reasons why he liked Celeste as a useful, you know, tool type thing was that when she cleaned up, she found these puzzle pieces. Now in this world, puzzle pieces don't exist, so Dahato would throw them away, whereas she carefully picked them all up, cleaned them, and then put them in like a little, you know, basket. And he appreciated this because he kind of saw that and went, oh, she didn't throw them away, and not to mention she also polished them, and he appreciated that because he likes puzzles. Now the bit that left a big impact is that he's really cute in the sense that when oh, it's so adorable. You can tell this is like the one bit I really liked about this route. He'll be solving the puzzles while giggling to himself. So he'll be like, yeah, that's right. It may seem difficult, but once you get the edges, it's a piece of cake. And then he's like giggling to himself while he manages to like slot the pieces in. And it is really cute, like watching that. So that is one thing that I liked about the route. But yeah, so I'd say like the things I did enjoy was the fact that, you know, they state very clearly at the beginning that he's kind of emotionless, so therefore he doesn't really feel love. Like, they made it clear, and then they didn't break from that and make it so that he suddenly changes for like no reason. It's very clear even until the end, and he literally says to Celeste at the end, he goes, like, before they go to the research facility and start the cloning process, he literally says to her, although right now the best I feel is that you're an incredibly useful tool, hopefully I'll know soon what it feels like to be in love with you. So even at the end, it's very clear that he doesn't love her, he's just sort of, he just wants to know almost. It's like curiosity. And I also appreciated the fact that Celeste accepts this. She's not like whinging and being annoying that, oh no, he doesn't love me and I can't get over this, I'm so sad, and there was none of this, and there was none of this, oh I need to change him, I can change. There was none of that. It was very, you know, straight to the point, very logical, and she just accepted that he is who he is, and there's not going to be a change unless he turns into a clone with emotion. And you know, I actually really appreciated that, because so many Otome games do this nonsensical, oh they've changed and there's no real reason behind it, and it's not, it's got its own perks, but it's not what I wanted in this route, considering it's supposed to be a despair type game, you know. But anyway, I think that's it. So yeah, I think I've said everything. As I said, please do let me know if you thought differently. I'd be really interested, because I did feel a little bit sad and let down that I didn't enjoy this route compared to Lucas and Mattis's route, especially because I like the character design of Xi'an so much. But you know, it is what it is. As always, thank you very much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And hopefully, maybe I'll see you in the next video where I'll be talking about Eve. But yeah, again, thank you. Bye!